Psychology complexes. This is our 433rd meeting since we started in February 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require our speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. They go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, we remind the interrupter to listen only one fool at a time. It's one of our rules. Then we have questions and answers from the audience, not speeches of the speaker. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium here to respond to the speaker said for or against. And the speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speaker, we have time for announcements. Anybody have any announcements you want to make?
Yeah, we have Philosophers Forum is meeting.
Here.
All right. Philosophers Forum is meeting this Tuesday at El Phoenix at Skillman and Adelia, and we're talking about the changing political landscape. So it's going. There's a blurb on the website. If you look at philosophersforum.org, you can find the date for this Tuesday, and there's a big old long blurb about it. I won't bore you with all the details. But anyway, that's I just invite everybody to come out.
Any other announcements? Now's the time. Get out of your system, you know. No announcements? All right. Well, our next week, our speaker is Jian. No, it's Julie Britton. She's not here today. I don't see her, but anyway, she'll be our speaker. She's going to talk about on recognizing that the only thing to fear is fear itself. It's on your itinerary. I'm not going to read all this. On November 3rd, John Beasley's our speaker. He's sitting right there. He'll be talking about lessons from Karl Marx, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It'll be quite informative, and I think you need to be here to hear it. John is very good at what he says here, and so anyway.
You need to be here to hear it.
You need to be here to hear it.
We'll be here there.
So anyway, on November 10th, Gary Foster, he's going to talk about don't like fake news, and you should not be an American Indian. He's an American Indian. He's going to talk about his view of things from that perspective, and it's quite good. So anyway, November 17th, on the power of small numbers, Tony Robinson, he'll be speaking. November 24th, there's no meeting, it's Thanksgiving weekend. December 1st, on the question of juvenile and criminal justice reform, Elizabeth Cody will be here, will be our speaker. December 8th is open if anybody wants to be a speaker. December 15th, we have the Cult of Saints and Relics, Medieval Martyrs and Miracles. Dr. Paul Benson, Professor of Humanities, Mountain View College, he'll be here to speak on that. Should be interesting. Anyway, our speaker tonight is Jian Li. Is that what I said right? Jian Li? And she's going to talk about from impermanence to freedom. She's a PhD in anthropology, and she's also a Mandarin teacher. She will discuss how the understanding and appreciation of the concept of impermanence can lead to a happier and more fruitful life. She argues that true freedom is achieved from within, not without, and we all have the power to achieve total freedom by leading life with mindfulness and compassion. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Jian Li. An hour if you want.
Okay, thank you. I need to drink. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to be here to share with you lessons I learned from life. As a spiritual seeker, I've been asking myself a question. What is something that is universally true and is beyond the leap of faith? A few years ago, I thought I found the answer. there are two things that's universally true. One is everyone would die. Everyone dies eventually. And two is everything changes. Physically, tables and chairs in front of you, everything changes. As the saying goes, you can't step into the river twice, same river twice. Until I was challenged by someone who looked at me in the eye and said, "Are you sure everyone would eventually die?" And then I started to think, and I stumbled, and I said, "Yes, everyone would die, except if you believe in some afterlife." So some people believe in heaven and hell, and some people believe in rebirth. For these people, death doesn't mean physical death, like those who don't have that kind of faith. So because of that, I was looking for the universal truths. And since some people don't consider death is eventual pass away from the earth, I don't say that anymore. So the only truth that now I can comfortably say is everything in the universe changes. Thus the concept of impermanence. And this concept of impermanence, nothing stays the same, is a fundamental concept in Hinduism and Buddhism. But it is also verified by science, such as in biology and physics, that we know the atoms and molecules of everything in front of you always change. And our body is constantly changed in some ways. So that's the only thing that I feel like I can comfortably say that's universally true. But then this leads to another question. For people who believe in God, God brings much comfort for their daily life. But how come the understanding and appreciation of impermanence help us to lead a fulfilled, meaningful life? To answer this question, I developed a 5-point explanations of why actually appreciating the impermanence of life can help us to appreciate this life and live this life more fully. The first point of the impermanence that can help us to live more fully is that understanding the impermanence implies everything in the universe, be it in the natural world or personal life, psychological, social, is in constant change. Therefore, if we clinging to the past, neglecting the present and being anxious about the future, these will be the major sources of our anxieties. You probably have heard the saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is mystery, today is a gift. That's why we call it present. Understanding the impermanent nature of things help us to appreciate every minute of present life and to enjoy our life in full, instead of always thinking back the past and then worry about the future. The only moment that we should pay our total attention is the present. So this is my first point of appreciating the notion of impermanence. And the second point of appreciating impermanence is the direction of change. When we talk about change, we are most likely to think in linear terms. Linear terms, that is past, present, and future, or from birth to death, and then time in between birth and death. To some believers, there is also heaven and hell. This is also linear way of thinking. One is horizontal, thinking about from A to B, from birth to death, and then time in between, and the other is horizontal, above and below. Can we imagine a direction of change that is nonlinear? How about cyclical? Look at day and night, 4 seasons. Nature has a lot of examples of change that is not linear but cyclical. Not only nature has examples of changes in cycles, but in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, the change is also conceptualized as kind of cyclical instead of linear. For example, the concept of karma, the spiritual principle of cause and effect, where intent and action of karma would affect not only this life, but maybe next life. So if sometimes we ask the question, why bad things happen to good people, because we are only seeing a short duration of time. In Buddhism and Hinduism, the duration of time is beyond this life, so it can come back next life and get either reward, lessons, punishment, because of the things that you have done in this life. So in a sense, it's also a cyclical understanding of life. This nonlinear way of thinking about change may be comforting to many people. The end of this life may not signal the end of life, like in capital L. Even though your good intentions and deeds are not rewarded in this life, you may reap the rewards in next life. Well, this sounds too esoteric or even superstitious. We may be comforted by the thought that the good deeds that we have performed and the life we have touched will have a lasting impact on those who will survive us. So even if we don't believe in karma, we can still see the things that you have done, the contributions you have made will touch people who are still alive, and people still remember the legacy you have left. This is the second point. And the third point is affirming life. Although there are natural disasters such as floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis strike us from time to time, but nature as a whole has a self-regulating and a self-renewal system that sustains and supports life. And our body also has a self-regulating system that brings us back to health if we pay enough attention to keep it as healthy as possible. So we can nurture the seeds of health, joy, and compassion, and hope for ourselves and for our fellow beings and the environment. In general, in the long run, the earth has supported life for billions of years. So there is this life nurturing system that surrounds us, and we have a choice to nurture and to protect the environment and protect our own health. Number 4 is to know when to let go. And another piece of achieving freedom is to know when to let things go. That is, when the calling of nature is greater than the human effort. This is beautifully expressed by the Serenity Prayer. Many of you probably have heard about the Serenity Prayer. It goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Letting go or non-attachment from Buddhist teachings is the concept of non-attachment. Non-attachment is not a negative term, is a positive in the sense that not attached to the results. We letting go non-attachment doesn't mean that we don't care about what is going on in our lives and in the world. It means we care deeply about the world, but we let go of the attachment to results that are beyond our control. There are things that we can change, and there are things that are beyond our control. So that's why we need to have the wisdom to know which is which. And by not clinging to the things that are outside our control, we will be able to lessen a lot of sufferings. Finally, number 5, impermanence actually is not an idea, not a notion, but it is an insight. As Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk and a teacher originally from Vietnam, reminds us in his book, The Art of Power. He said, many of us try desperately to hold on to some notion of stability and permanence. We become anxious when we hear the teaching of impermanence. But impermanence is not just negative. Impermanence can be very positive. Everything is impermanent, including injustice, poverty, pollution, and global warming. In our lives, there is a misunderstanding. There is a violence, there is a conflict, there is despair. But these things are also impermanent. And because they are impermanent, they can be transformed if we have insight into how to live in the present moment. To illustrate these above points, I'd like to share with you the story of Brother Chi-Sing, founder of the Dallas Meditation Center, and how his life has embodied the transformational power of impermanence. In his own words, he says it's a beautiful transformation process from being a caterpillar into a butterfly. I chose Brother Chi-Sing because I had brief encounters with him in Dallas, and I could still feel his spirit whenever I visit Dallas Meditation Center, read his books, and listen to his music and recorded Dharma talks. As I was preparing for this talk, I searched for my computer of my records of Brother Chi-Sing and found several entries of him on my laptop. The first record I found about him was January 25th, 2009. As a member of the Sunday Service Committee of the Community Unitarian Universalist Church of Plano at that time, I introduced Brother Chi-Sing to the congregation. His sermon topic of that day was, "Let the Buddha breathe, let it walk." Here is my introduction of him. Brother Chi-Sing is a Texan, born and raised in Texas, but not a typical Texan as you might think. He has a BA in religion from a Protestant university a MA in spirituality from a Catholic college, and a Master of Divinity degree from a Unitarian Universalist seminary. His primary meditation teacher is the Venerable Tena Han, and he was ordained by him into the Order of Interbeing. In 2003, he got the name True Wonderful Happiness, and that's his Qixing comes from. Probably is a Cantonese word of wonderful happiness. His parents were Cantonese, Chinese, American. He was also commissioned into ministry by a congregation of the United Church of Christ in 1995. Currently, he is an interfaith retreat facilitator, spiritual director, ritual artist, musician, and a founder of Awakening Heart. From this introduction, you could see the richness of his spiritual journey and his willingness to be open to the different faith traditions. My next record of Brother Qixing was dated on May 16, 2009. I signed up as a participant at his Interfaith Day of Mindfulness retreat. During the retreat, he asked us to write a letter to God or universe. Being an agnostic, I was surprised to find under Brother Qixing's guidance, I not only wrote a letter to the Holy. I avoided the word of God because it's a loaded word. So I wrote a letter to the Holy, but also received a letter back. Here it is. So here's what I wrote under the guidance of Brother Qixing. It was written on May 16, 2009, during the retreat. So I wrote, "Dear Holy, where are the sources of Holy? How do I find you? Why are there so many sufferings in the world? You seem to be so near, yet so remote. Is the Holy in our heart? Is the Holy in the universe? Is there objective truth? Is there psychological truth? How should we live a meaningful life? What is my calling? Sincerely, Jian." And then I got a letter from the Holy. You want to hear?
Sure.
Okay. It says, "Dear Jian, there's a time to learn, there's time to teach, there's time to seek. There's time to give, there's time to receive, there's time to meditate. Just remember, when you learn, teach, seek, give, receive, meditate, do it with all your heart, all your mind, and all your dedication. Go forward in your journey with love, hope, and faith. For I am with you always, as long as you keep love, hope, and faith in your heart. Yours, Holy." That was written 9 years ago, and Brother Qixing passed away 2 years ago due to cancer in 2016. He passed away at a very young age, and he was 47 years old. 2 years before his passing, on April 20, 2014, he gave a talk sharing his insight on the samadhi of everyday life and death at the Dallas Meditation Center. He told the members of the Dallas Meditation Center his reflections on life and death after he was diagnosed as having late-stage cancer. His cancer was diagnosed in 2014, and he passed away in 2016, only for 47 years old. Instead of being depressed, he saw his cancer as an opportunity to transform his life again. As he beautifully put it, he saw in his mind a caterpillar going into a cocoon and creating a cocoon all around himself, and then coming out as a butterfly. The meaning came out from this image was that he realized his life could have two possibilities. One is life, a new life, emergence after healing process on two fronts, physical and spiritual. Although his doctors focused more on his physical health, he saw it an opportunity to really find the deeper meaning of his life. How he could reconcile from his past and fully live in the present. He said, so if I live, then what I came through from this healing journey, I know I will be a very different person from what I have been. My ministry is going to be 100% bright and shining. My sincerity and integrity going to be even more intense, true, and honest. I have healed from so much unforgiveness, regret, resentment, bitterness. It's amazing how much I have already let go through this healing journey. On the other hand, if I die physically, I'll become the butterfly, releasing all the stuff that have been holding me back, letting go of the unforgiveness and finding the jewel of the meaning of my life and moving into a realm of love, light, and life, and eternal. And I already know that if I die, what awaits me is so wonderful. There's really nothing to be afraid of. He concluded it by saying, so come to think about it, I get to become butterfly, to release the shackles of limitations and be free once again. And that is wonderful. That takes away the fear of death for me. Towards the end of his life, Brother Qixing gained a sense of total freedom from this impermanent life when he used the metaphor from caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly to describe his journey, whether to live or die. He firmly believed that a butterfly is guaranteed either way, so there's nothing to worry about. I love it. Whether you live or die, it's great. Amazing. That's his original words. The last Dharma talk given by Brother Qixing was made on February 21st, 2016, and he passed away peacefully at home on March 8, 2016, less a month in between. His passing at a young age reminds us of the impermanence of life, yet out of the impermanence comes the transformation of new opportunities for growth. I would not be here with this topic if I hadn't met him about 10 years ago. Dallas Meditation Center is still going strong today, even without the physical guidance from its founder, Brother Qixing. It now serves about 150 people a week, or 600 people a month. To Brother Qixing's credit, it is not registered as a religious organization. It is registered as a 501c3 educational human services organization. It is a home to meditation, mindfulness, yoga, tai chi, qigong, music, creative expression, and other genuine traditions of meditation and mindful living. It is open to people of any tradition, including those not from any faith-based tradition. As Tinaheim puts it beautifully, realizing impermanence as an insight reminds us that life is precious, that we have to treasure every moment of life. Also with impermanence, everything is possible. This reminds me of the lyrics I heard from Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything, and that's how light gets in. Our world is not perfect. Nothing stays same all the time. With faith, hope, and compassion, we can transform a crack into something beautiful and transform impermanence into opportunities for growth and freedom. Thank you.
Where is the center located?
It's on Arapahoe and West Shore. If you Google Dallas Meditation Center, you will find it. Yes.
You've mentioned that you had had a transformation 2-3 years ago, whatever it was. What were your belief systems at that point, or your just general philosophy as it relates to your life, compared to how it's obviously changed from being connected to this brother? You know, what were you philosophical or more spiritual, whatever? I'm sorry, could you hear me?
Well, yeah. When I talk about transformation, I talk a lot about Brother Chi Xing's transformation. But I have myself, the spiritual journey, I would say I started as an atheist and then become an agnostic. And now I'm moving towards a mystic. You know, the difference between agnostic and mystic. Agnostic is, I don't know if God exists or not exists, right?
Question.
It is questioning. A mystic is more opening to the possibilities. Opening to the possibilities of existence of things that we don't know. Sometimes I think it's a wishful thinking. Sometimes I think it's a choice we make. So as a choice that I make, I would rather choose to believe there is a more benevolent source than there is a darker source. As a choice I make, I would rather to choose being more compassionate to everything, everyone, than to be suspicious of other people's intentions. To be open to different kind of ideas and theories so I can grow, instead of to dispute things that I don't believe. It is difficult sometimes, but I remind myself of trying to see others' point of views, including things, mystical things that we cannot see. But if I don't have a personal experience, I will not say yes, there is, or no, there's not. For people who have seen and experienced, I congratulate them for having the experience. But personally, I haven't had a direct experience.
I just think it's interesting that you went from atheist to agnostic, normally the other way around. And what shows your openness to different ideas, right?
Right.
Did you want, John, did you have a question?
I did.
Oh,
Very nice, thank you, enjoyed that. So this idea of resistance
yours is on
with impermanence.
Yeah.
And my friend and I have the saying, the river always wins.
Good play at this thing.
And
Can you speak up into the
taking the path
microphone?
of least
My pleasure.
resistance.
I always had
Just move away from the speaker there and then speak louder.
No, I just said, when you were bringing up the idea of impermanence, I thought of the state of being that is associated with resistance, and that the Asian philosophy embraces the path of least resistance. And my girlfriend and I always say the river always wins about flow and impermanence and the process, which holds no value and just goes on in infinity. So I appreciate the concepts you shared around this temporal idea of our existence. Thank you.
Are you a Buddhist?
No, I said I'm agnostic, becoming a mystic.
Well, I often jest that in my last life, I didn't believe in reincarnation either. But you mentioned reincarnation. What is your particular concept of it as far as what you feel you understand?
I bring this up only as to me as a theory. Since I told you I'm a agnostic and a mystic, I don't know if reincarnation is or is not, because there's no. There are some. To some people that's the evidences that it exists, but to me, it is still waiting to be verified as not 100%. But in a way, like if I were to have a wishful thinking, I would rather to have rebirth than not to have, because it gives kind of more meaning and learning opportunities for us. Probably one life is not enough. We might need to have several lives to learn and grow. But whether there is one or there's not one, I cannot know for sure. I don't claim to know.
Considering your journey from atheist to agnostic to mystic, what would you say to an atheist?
Well, I think atheist is sometimes too strong opinionated, because a strong atheist would say, like, I know for sure there's no God. There are two problems with this statement. One problem is definition of God. And second is it is not verifiable. Verifiable either way, there is one or there's not one. So it's not, in that sense, it is not scientific. Being scientific is a verifiable truth, verifiable experiments, but you cannot experiment really how to prove there is one or is not. So I don't consider myself as an atheist anymore. But I see the value of atheists in today's world, because many atheists have a very strong science background and want to combat the ignorance of anti-science trend. So in that sense, I see the value. But from the scientific point of view, you cannot verify there is one, there is not.
What about when people remember their past lives, as has happened with not just remembering their past lives, but certain hypnosis techniques are able to take people back into remember past lives? There's even a gentleman, I think his last name is Newton, he wrote a book called Journey of Souls and another one called Destiny of Souls, which if you want to find online, I found them by adding a .pdf and Googling the title and the name of the author, and you'll find a website where you can probably download the book for free.
Yes, I have read and I've listened and watched videos, people's experiences. I think this is, in a way, it's like the atheist claim there is no God, or the other way, there is rebirth because there are some people's experiences. But to be scientific is things that repeatable and repeatable with different groups of populations. You have to do blind tests, you have to do scientific experiments. So we are not at a stage that we can do scientific experiments and to do verifiable tests. So that's why I chose to be a mystic, in the sense that I keep options open, but I'm not sure whether there is one or there's not. I know people who strongly believe there's a reincarnation, and they would find evidences to support their beliefs. But again, we are not at a stage to verify it scientifically. In fact, I have seen discussions and talks by university professors. There is a branch psychology, I forgot the name of the psychology, that some universities now study. This used to be called paranormal psychology. There's another word for it. It actually now enters academic study now about reincarnation and near-death experiences. It now actually is becoming a more credible subject of study.
Are you familiar with some of the studies that they did with some of these, where they did all these psychic tests, various universities around the United States? One gentleman took all of the results from those tests and looked for patterns in the results to see if there was maybe a time of day at which people would be more psychic than any other time of the day. And they found a confirmation that there was a day, time of day, but it wasn't related to our time with relation to the sun, but instead with relation to the center of the galaxy, called sidereal time.
Which year was the study done?
Oh, I'd have to dig into a book and find it. So actually, he found that there was a relationship that when the Earth is on the when you're on the opposite side,
mic, please.
when you're on the opposite side of the Earth lends. The theory is that the center of the galaxy is sending energy our way, and this impacts our consciousness and makes us more psychic. That the point in time when we are on the opposite side of the Earth from the center of the galaxy, that there is a lensing effect that somehow increases the effect of the energy on the mind at that point, and that's where energy basically enhances our psychic abilities.
Sounds interesting.
I want to touch on the subject of consciousness in the sense of thinking and listening. What?
Question.
I'm going to ask here. The difference between thinking and listening as far as consciousness is concerned, which do you think is more important?
Thinking and listening. I think both are important. Actually, nowadays, the studies of consciousness is more of intuitive consciousness, that is neither thinking nor listening. Listening and thinking are rational thoughts. Consciousness goes beyond rational thought. And this is something I've been thinking about, is that we are more likely to use rational thought. I am more likely to use rational thought because I can use my rational thought to solve problems. But real breakthroughs of thinking, of art, science, actually needs to be outside of thinking, listening, but a more intuitive sense of understanding. I know very bright people, they don't think in words. If we think in words, we are limited by our logic. Great inventions probably have something to do with some intuitive breakthrough. And arts, music, poems help us to go beyond our rational thought, our just listening and thinking.
Jian, do you think Americans in general will ever be happy with now? Because they always seem to be waiting for something in the future. For example, there's a great group hoping that America will be made great again. There's another group hoping that the second coming will happen, and they'll enjoy a rapture and shoot up to some other place. So the question is, do you think they will ever be happy with now?
Well, I think what is important is each individual. It's not, say, Americans, because they are different people who have different ideas and different expectations. What I'm now concerned with is how I can have a compassionate heart and a heart filled with peace and compassion. I cannot change others, but I can change myself. And I think if each of us can look within and bring the best in ourselves, that is the starting point of changing the world. Instead of thinking big, we cannot. As you know, whatever political spectrum a person is, most of them have hardly changed, but budgeted. Whoever likes this political figure or that political figure, after so many months, 2 years, most people have not budged. So I don't put my bet on changing others. I put bet on changing myself.
Relative to science and consciousness, there are these things called chakras that have spinning vortexes of energy that line up along the spine, which indicate that there is a input coming into the spine from above and below, that there's a two-way flow of energy creating these vortexes at 7 different body centers within the body. But there's also the concept that these vortexes exist outside the body, above the head. And I was wondering what your concept of this has to do with regards to consciousness. Are these energy fields related to the mind in any way?
I know in yoga practice, in Hinduism, they practice balance the chakras, and each chakra is related to some energy field. Chinese medicine also recognizes their different qi meridians, pathways. These, I think, I don't know how science is going to help us to get insight into it. Some people discount them because science cannot explain. Some people think science is not at a stage to detect those energy fields.
How do you detect it?
Some aspects of probably some aspects of chi chakras have been detected, but I personally, like I said, I will not discount or believe until science can tell us more about things that we cannot see right now. Of course, things that we cannot see doesn't mean things don't exist. Some people discount things that we cannot see, but there are a lot of things that we cannot see. And you probably heard the dark matter, dark energy is greater than the energy fields of molecules we can see today, right? So we just have to keep our minds open to the possibilities. But until science can really verify, I don't really lightly believe in existence or non-existence of energy fields. I personally do yoga. I personally do meditation. I do at least 5 to 10 minutes meditation in the morning. I do yoga 2 times for health reasons. One aspect of health is your spirit or your heart. If you are constantly anxious, your cortisol level will be high and your immune system will be weakened. So part of being healthy is to be able to be calm and to do the things that you can and to be hopeful for the future and not to dwell on the regret, dwell on the things that you cannot change. So to me, it's a choice to make, to keep myself positive. If I keep myself positive, it leads to a better health, and it also leads to be a more pleasant person.
Jian, is this on? Before you had mentioned that agnostics a little too opinionated and what have you.
Atheist.
What about the
I said atheist.
Sorry, atheist. Thank you for correcting. Was too opinionated, dogmatic, what have you. But then, what about the other 180 degree? Is that not opinionated and very dogmatic, like someone
what do you
who
mean that
has spiritual belief in heaven and faith and God and all of that? And the second part of the question is, given the quest for mindfulness and a realization of impermanence and being open, would not the agnostic be more open to truly exploring that rather than going by a guide that's already been directed at the other end of the spectrum?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah. So that's why I'm kind of on a path, like from agnostic. I was agnostic. I am still agnostic, but I'm moving towards mysticism. Mysticism, there's more opening to possibilities. You said the extremes. Probably you mean the fundamentalists, the religious fundamentalists. But personally, I think if any faith that can help the person to be comforted, to be hopeful, not afraid of death, works for that person. It's good for that person. The problem occurs when someone's trying to push his or her belief to someone else. So if when someone says they believe in this or that, I say it's good for you. It's good for you. It works for you, but it doesn't mean it works for everyone. So I don't want to have someone trying to push me to believe in something. It should be a personal journey. If a personal journey leads you to a path, any path that make you more compassionate, it's a good path for you. But everyone is different, so just stay on a path that work for you and don't push it to other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand.
When I think of mysticism, I think of communicating with another realm. Is that what you mean? Do you feel, or do you communicate with another realm?
So of course there are different degrees of mysticism. To some mystics, it's more active of communicating to in a way to a supernatural force. It's hard for me. In general, I think I'm still too rational, and I don't want to surrender my rationality. And I don't know it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Actually, I want to, at this stage, I want to be more flexible and want to be able to surrender myself to a force that's greater than myself. So I do have that intention, but I'm still very rational, and it doesn't come easily for me to surrender my rational thought. I'm very proud of my rational thought. I'm very proud of scientific method, but I see the value of being open to other possibilities.
Sorry, I'm Jane's friend. You talked about this belief is a personal journey. I have a question. I just like Jen, I'm not a born American citizen. I'm from China and I've been here for 30-something years. But from day one, almost the first year I came here, I was approached by many fundamentalists or whatever you call them. They really push you very much to the extent you don't feel comfortable. That's the reason sometimes I try to stay away a little bit from this. So that question is to all of you. I don't experience that. Seems in Europe, in many other countries, but in America, it seems a lot of people are very strong feelings about that. Why is that? How to explain this phenomena? I just feel that from day one, never got an answer. I thought maybe today I can ask this question. If any of you can answer my question.
We will have a time for everyone, anyone who comes here.
I'll answer it.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead, answer.
During the,
I don't know if but I
this is
just
a
feel
question
very
period here.
interesting.
There are so many different reasons, and I try very hard to be respectful of other people's beliefs. I don't want to make sweeping judgment. So as I get older, I more likely to look within and to know who I am and what I want to believe. I feel like, as I said, we cannot change other people, we can only change ourselves. So I don't appreciate people pushing their views on me, and I will not do that to other people. I think the conflict in today's world is that we have people who are so sure about their beliefs that they think that's the only right way, and that creates problems. How many of you know, I just came to know the singer, poet, the last one that I quoted by Leonard Cohen. He said, there's a crack in everything, and that's how light gets in. So I feel he has the wisdom of telling us there's always imperfection, that if we are aware of imperfection and we can grow. If you think you know the best, you know everything, how can you grow? Okay.
You can sit down now.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So anybody has anything to say, now's the time to do it. Who wants to be first? Either for or against what the speaker has to say. You get 5 minutes.
I can still stand up and walk. To the question our Chinese guest asked a while ago, I thought the speaker did a pretty good job of addressing exactly that. First of all, I would say this is opinion, this is not fact. Our country is made up of pioneers. They are, over the years, they have been constructed of some of the toughest, you could say meanest, strongest willed people on the planet of the earth who would have the guts to pack up and leave their country and come to the, at one point in time, they would say barren United States, which is populated thinly by the Native American population. If you look back at the writings in our early history, those were some pretty tough cowboys. And when you come here from a country that's in the Orient, and I have Orient in my own family, a daughter-in-law, and I understand more than some people might, just because it's inside my own family. I've met the people, I've talked to them a lot, I understand what their viewpoints are. But just as a general statement, a statement of kindness to anybody who's come here from a country that is less, not the right term, more passive in expressing their viewpoints than up-in-your-face politics, to put it in a political viewpoint, like we all get too much of here lately, right? Up in your face. I'm going to tell you that the world is going to go straight to hell and burn in the fire and brimstone if you don't adopt my political views and vote for the person I want to be in the office. You know, I mean, we're hearing too much of that stuff. I'm so glad I voted by mail a week ago, and I don't care if I found out the people I voted for are the devil himself. I voted for him, right? So it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's serious, but it's also nice to be able to look at it and sort of laugh at it. But, you know, people who behave as our guest described tonight, and that is come and talk to you about their religious beliefs in a way that you may view from your cultural background as being somewhat pushy, aggressive, and belligerent. If you were able to go inside their mind and look, you might find that although, like sometimes my voice comes out sounding mad when I'm not. My wife used to get me and say, "Jim, don't talk like that. You sound like you're angry." Well, I wasn't mad, dear. Well, you sounded that way. That person may have been doing that out of nothing but care for you, because they have beliefs deep in their heart, in their mind, in their soul, in their whatever you want to describe them as, the core of their beliefs, and they want to express them to another person. They may do that in a way that you don't find particularly appealing. I'll tell you one other thing and then I'll sit down and shut up. I've only told this one time in our group in the years that we've been going since Tom and I started up in 2009. Like many of you in this room, I grew up in a religious family. I know at one point in time we had 5 people in the group who grew up in Christian families, went to Catholic schools, and they were all either agnostic or atheistic in their current beliefs. So as people, we do evolve. And it's like looking at people in the economy. They grow and they shrink. People make lots of money, they lose lots of money. They're not always on the scale in the same place like the politicians sometimes tell us. So we do change a lot. But anyway, I grew up with a mother who was a church organist. My father was religious, but he didn't really espouse it. He just sort of played along with the game. But as you can imagine, it was just like being a PK. I was in the church every time the frapping doors were open, because my mother was there for every church service. My mother played for the funerals, for the weddings. She played for all the funerals. Her father made tombstones. I knew every trail. It was kind of silly. I knew every trail and every graveyard in the metro Dallas area, you know. And so I was exposed to an awful lot of that in my early life. At age 5, I could probably stand up right where I am right now on a stool and preach a halfway good 10-minute sermon, because I'd heard them so many times. I had all the common phrases memorized. It's like going to parochial school. They make you learn those things, right, Tom? I know you're looking at your watch. I'll shut up shortly. But I grew up with those strong feelings, okay? So when you have strong feelings, you always have a tendency as human beings to put what you see and what you hear through the filters that make up your life to the point you're at, whether it's school, church, home, neighborhood, anything you're around. Those all work as filters that help us give meaning to what we're seeing and what we're hearing. Well, I had one experience in my life, and I'm going to tell you real quickly about it. When I was 27 years old, I had one child. And one day in my office, I worked in the executive office of a manufacturing company that had 10 divisions. It was a very interesting job. I loved it. I wouldn't have taken it for anything. I wouldn't have taken anything for it. I felt odd when I came back from lunch. All I could remember was I got up and I walked about 12 or 15 steps over to an office of a fellow that I saw was there after lunch, just as I was. Had gotten in a little early. And I can remember intending to walk into his office and tell him I felt kind of weird. Well, that's all I remembered. I woke up laying on one of those flat bed devices that they have in the emergency room in the hospital. And I'd had a spinal tap to see if I'd had a cerebral hemorrhage, because that was a lot of the symptoms I was showing. Unfortunately, I had not. They kept me in the hospital for a week, largely I think to keep me restrained from getting up and running around with a spinal tap, which can be very injurious to you. But I'll tell you one thing, it had nothing to do with my personal beliefs, because this all happened while Jim was unconscious in the ambulance and in the hospital. They called my wife called her father called two of his best friends, and they said, the three of us here's what happened, Jim's in the hospital. We don't know what's wrong with him. Is he going to live? We don't know. I want all three of us to pray for Jim. And they prayed for me about 5 o'clock, and at 5:30 I was sitting up in the bed in the hospital. Did I have a life experience that I could say, oh, I don't know what's going on, I'm going to flip over to chapter such and such in this religious book that I use as my guidance and see what it says I ought to do? No, I was an unconscious human being. But those three men went before the throne of God and prayed for me and my body, and at age 67, I'm still standing here in front of you. And I attribute 100% of that to what those men were able to do to my benefit. The question is, well, Jim, would you have wakened up anyway at the same moment in time? Yeah, I might have. Would you have been as bright and alert as you were? Yeah, I might have. Would I still had my intelligence and been able to do my sophisticated accounting work? Yeah, I might have. But then I might have been asleep for 22 years too. So I'm just telling you, we all can have very different religious experiences that relate to different things. The most wonderful one I had in my whole life, and I've had a few, was when I was totally 100% unconscious, not in control, but other people cared about me. And if you don't think that doesn't mean something to you, then you don't know the sound of a cheer in a man's voice, because it means a great deal. Those men thought enough of me that they took their time and they prayed to their God for me, and I'm alive today. Thank you.
Who's next?
Go ahead.
5 minutes.
Not them.
There's a quote I always like to bring up in these types of discussions, and it's by a guy named Jiddu Krishnamurti. I'll pronounce it Murti, yeah. When you call yourself an Indian or a Muslim or a Christian or a European or anything else, you are being violent. Do you see why it is violent? Because you are separating yourself from the rest of mankind. When you separate yourself by belief, by nationality, by tradition, it breeds violence. So a man who is seeking to understand violence does not belong to any country, to any religion, to any political party or partial system. He is concerned with the total understanding of mankind. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But the nature of spiritual growth and understanding is such that everybody has a different viewpoint, and there are a lot of different types of personalities out there, and some people, they feel like they've got to be the touchy-feely types, and they got to go out there and get together and touch everybody and reach out and touch someone and connect with everybody. Some people are motivated by fear. Maybe they fear that all these lovely people that they know are going to burn in hell because they've been taught that there's an eternal place of damnation that non-believers will go to, and that motivates them. And I don't particularly believe that there is an eternal place of damnation. I think that was a very much of a made-up thing created to manipulate people into donating money to certain church organizations. But they do seem to get lots of money given to them. And then some of these guys go out and buy jet airplanes with them. And so there's not a lot of good things to be said about organized religion, but when you go back to the truth that originated that religion, and you look, investigate, you read, and you study what the wise men said, you find that most all these religions are saying the same damn thing over and over again. And you know, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I believe this guy and he says some of the same things your guy says, so why can't we be friends? Because we're all basically saying the same thing, love one another and doing all these basic rules of life that we all can sit down, and if we compare notes, we'll probably all agree on them. So, that's one thing. But then now, if we want to get into the science of it, well, there are some scientific breakthroughs coming out. They're discovering things about life force. And they're repeatable experiments. They're doing things with DNA that are repeatable experiments. They're doing some massive stuff. People just don't keep up with it, and it's not getting reported in the news media because they're afraid of telling you anything that might alter your perception of the world. Because maybe all of a sudden you go, hey, there is a God. That proves there's a God if that's true. And it's in science. And so there's a lot of breakthroughs in technology and science, and they're able to do some special things now that would indicate that they know how to create life almost. I mean, literally, they have taken boiling water, sanitized it completely. What do they call that whenever they make water so it's sterile? Perfectly sterile, and taking that water then into a certain type of energy field with a Faraday cage, and then all of a sudden they get the microscopes out and they start looking in this water, and they see all these microscopic organisms that should not exist in this water because it's supposed to be completely sterile. And they are organisms they've never seen before, as if they just miraculously appeared out of nowhere. And this is a repeatable experiment. Most people don't know about it, so they don't, basically we've discovered a way to show the creation of new life. And so that has to come from somewhere. That has to come from an energy field that exists all around us. And I'm of the opinion that the human brain is not the seat of our mind, that there are energy fields. These chakras are kind of like CPUs. And when you can synchronize them together, then your mind operates and functions in a synchronized manner. Now, in meditation, if you took transcendental meditation, they talked about synchronizing the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, and that the mind would operate in a much more cohesive manner, more coherent. And so there's a lot to this stuff, but that's all I got to say.
Well, I appreciate Jian sharing her journey with us. It sounds like a journey of finding truth and coming to some conclusions and decisions as we personally grow. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to go with this, but I grew up as a Christian, and mostly as a Lutheran. And I don't know where it came from, but I developed a lot of pretty fundamentalist ideas, was very definite and sure about a lot of things. And I've come to understand that life does not give you things the way you've got them all figured out. It tends to hit you crosswise and backwards and make you deal with things that you didn't think you'd have to deal with. And there's one thing that I find very frustrating is people that want to have absolute proof of certain things, about life, the universe, etc., and they're not going to believe anything unless they get absolute proof. Well, you're not going to get absolute proof. Right. So what you've got to deal with is evidence, and basically a preponderance of evidence. For instance, if 5,000 people share a very similar experience, there's probably something to that. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm on a journey as well, trying to understand what is truth. Is there any such thing as absolute truth? And lately I've been looking at a lot of near-death experiences that people have. Because I figure if somebody actually dies and goes to the other side and experiences something on the other side, and they come back and have something to say about it, that would be valuable, particularly if many people have the same experience. Well, many people do have the same experience. There's even I think International Association of Near-Death Experiences or something like that. And they have lots of people sharing these experiences. So one thing I have concluded is that there is an afterlife. I mean, you may not want to believe it, and a lot of these people that have had these experiences have come to understand that there is indeed an afterlife because they experienced it. They didn't believe it before they died, but once they died and went to the other side, they realized that there is indeed an afterlife. So, as far as Christianity goes and an understanding of heaven and hell, you can find on YouTube, probably other places too, where people have experiences of actually going to hell, experiencing it, seeing what it's like, and then coming back, and also going to heaven. There's people that you can find, like Kat Kerr, I think, she says she goes to heaven every day and comes back and talks to it. Well, yeah, I mean, you can ignore it or dismiss it if you want, but she's got lots of things to describe. But these things indicate very clearly to me that there is something beyond this life that we need to address. And my problem with atheists is they tend to think they've got everything figured out. There's no such thing as a supernatural. Anything spiritual is a brain fart. And if that's the case, there's some symphonic brain farts going on. But there's just so much more to this life than what we see and deal with every day. And I haven't got it all figured out, but I'm doing my best to try and look at things and look at evidence and see where the evidence leads. And I suggest, watch some of these videos, man. I mean, they're very, very interesting. And they say a lot of the same type of things, although from many different perspectives. So there's more to this life than what we see, much more. And there is an afterlife. And it would behoove us, I think, to understand that and deal with the possibilities there.
There is more in heaven and earth, O Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophies. I think that's what Ken was referring to. I would have no idea where to start on this subject. I think I can just kind of make little drops of water into the pond of information. Back in the 80s, I met a Colonel Sut Maurya, an Indian Army tank commander. And he was visiting with my family because my mother actually kind of got adopted in when one of her 6 trips to India. And so they felt, the family felt very close, so they visited us here in the States. And Sut was talking about when he was very young and he was able to talk, he began talking kind of almost one day. All of a sudden he just started talking and seemed to have a vocabulary, and he spoke to his parents using the pronouns of a superior elder. And they thought it was funny for a while, and then it began to bug them. And then they finally asked him, okay, who are you? Well, I'm your grandfather. Well, if your grandfather, where did you hide the money? Oh, it's over there. It's, you just dig it up. It's out, and he gave them a location, and they found a stash of money. And so that was, that's one anecdote. I spent an entire night from sundown through to sunrise the next morning with a Russian theoretical physicist, Moscow University trained, And he filled up what I guess would have been about 5 blackboards. He was erasing as he went. He had 2 blackboards, and he kind of erased and go back. And he was doing the equations, and then somewhere right as around sunrise, he popped the final statement, and I always get it wrong, but it's something to the effect of, due to the left-handed chirality in living matter, or the predominance of left-handed chirality in photons in living matter precludes any conclusion of randomness. And then he explained, he said that is the closest a physicist can come to saying there's a God. In other words, he was saying that there's more organization in the world than can be explained by any theory of chaos or random selection.
Coherence of light could be due to gravity fields as well.
This is different.
Oh, okay.
Photons have left-handed and right-handed chirality.
Spinning?
It's spinning, yeah. It's very deep. And I mean, I saw all the equations and they meant nothing to me, but I kept agreeing with
Half
them.
of them weren't going left and half of them weren't going right, which is what it should have been.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, there are many other things like that. Many of us on the internet have come across the case of the young boy who has memories of being a fighter pilot in World War II, and gave detailed, was drawing charts as soon as he could draw and talk, and to his parents, who were good Baptists. And they didn't understand at all what he was. Finally, they started getting it that he seemed to have memories, and then they tracked down. He had a reunion meeting with his the remaining members of his military unit, and I mean, he connected names and things and all that. And I mean, you can go in, and one of the normal Christian reactions that I get, and I mean, I have a background in Hinduism. I traveled to India when I was 17 and was there when I was 18 as well. And it's very unfortunate because I am a practicing Christian, but I can't really talk to any Christian about Hinduism or Hindu thought because the gods of the heathens are demons. You know, it's just everything gets put in that one basket, and you can't go anywhere from there. You can't say there are many similarities, there are many this, that, and the other. I'll try to give a second explanation for what Jim was working at there. Is one of the things, as a Christian, you are instructed to be a disciple. You are instructed to speak of the faith and promulgate the faith, not to just get baptized, accept the Holy Spirit, and just, you know, warm a pew somewhere in a church. You're supposed to be active, and that goes back to kind of the whole nature of what's going on with Christianity, and I'm still investigating it. I mean, it's you know, when I grew up, I was actually a preacher's son, and everything that's said about preacher's sons, I probably fit into that category. It's amazing I didn't get arrested. It's amazing I didn't have to go to military school. I mean, you know, they're just, but I did kind of straighten up, and so I'm over in India at age 18. I've been following the travels of a lady saint in India who is the only remaining alive person mentioned in a book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And I really wanted to meet her, and I finally got my private interview scheduled. An Austrian lady in her 70s was going to translate for me. Her name was Blanca Schlum. She left Austria right before Hitler took over there, and very fortunate since she was Jewish. And she lived the rest of her life here in India, and her name was Atmananda. And there's even a interview of her on the internet. But anyway, I digress. So I'm there, I'm expecting to get this private interview with this great lady saint and finally get my spiritual questions answered. And Indira Gandhi has the bad manners to come in and take my time slot. I got bumped by Indira Gandhi, and I'm standing outside with Rajiv and the palace guards, and hanging out with them for a while before I realized I just missed the whole thing, because but that was the quality of this lady who was there. She exhibited many different yoga abilities and prescience, and you just name it. I mean, one of the things that really brought me around to accepting Jesus is the fact that I saw many of the miracles of Jesus being performed by this lady. She did bring people back from the dead. She healed people. She materialized food. In 72, I sat down to a meal. I was served food. She materialized. The food ran out, and then she materialized about 5 pots of food and fed another 300 people. And I ate that food. I can't say it was really the best. It was just regular Indian food. I mean, you have this Germanic idea that there's going to be some kind of perfection on some level, when you're encountering divine things, and it was just really very human. But reincarnation. I've got a lot of personal stories. I can save those for later, though, if anybody wants to talk to me. But I've had instances in my life that really honestly prove it to me. But and I was at a magician's meeting in Chicago. It's one of the biggest meetings of magicians from around the world, and magicians, sleight of hand and so forth, and they're talking about how all these different tricks were done, Harry Houdini and so forth, and I mean, they really studied. Some of these guys are really fantastic. I mean, you're seeing ladies cut in half and all the good stuff. I mean, and I'm videotaping their whole conference, and then this is after hours. They're all sitting around drinking Jack Daniels and straight vodka, and just getting completely potted. And there's about 50 of them at this one floor of the hotel. They're all sitting around, and they're bringing up this case of this Jewish rabbi back in about 1910, who was doing one trick where he disappeared and relocated or did something weird like that. And finally I got pissed at him. And I'm trying to remember exactly how I said it. I said, "You are the most duped in the world, because you believe if it could have been done as a trick." I'm saying it wrong, but if it could have been a magic trick, it had to be a magic trick. I mean, that was their basic assumption. They're all atheists. I don't know. There's some connection between magicians and atheists, but they don't believe. It's like the Amazing Randy. He's ready to debunk anything. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter how true it is.
Right. Doesn't matter how true it is. And that was this group here. And I basically said, you all are the most taken of anybody, because you honestly believe that there's some way somebody could have done it by trickery, that it had to have been done that way.
Shortly, Lord. Oh, man, I'm never over 3 minutes, am I? Oh, I was thinking what you said, you can only influence yourself. Of course, I was a Girl Scout leader, Cub Scout leader and all. I think I influenced all these little children to behave and be mannerly and all. But I had a girlfriend once. This is a funny story. And I had no idea I had such influence over this person. I started telling her when I was young, I went to the Christian Science Church, and I said how wonderful it is to never think of yourself as being sick, and that you use your mind, tell yourself you have divine energy coming through you, and you're never to be sick. And so lo and behold, she goes to the Christian Science Church because I said this, and joined the church. So then I visited different churches. So then I went, told her how wonderful the Episcopal Church is. Because I'd switched over to the Episcopal faith. Well, lo and behold, she goes to the Episcopal Church and joins the church. So I also have Methodist friends, and I was really afraid to tell her about the Methodist Church.
The world turned.
Well, it'd be kind of hard to top that story. I like that a lot. When I mentioned the difference between thinking and listening, the listening had nothing to do with left brain analytical thinking. It meant getting consciousness completely out of human consciousness completely out of the way. I used to have a book, and I think I've mentioned this before, of interviews by people who were brain surgeons and psychiatrists and so forth, trying to analyze what is this thing, the human brain consciousness and all this field of thought. And one was by interview was of David Bohm, who was a physicist in England. And he was talking about a thing he called sudden insight. And he said sudden insight can happen only when you completely cease thinking. Even thinking about not thinking will interfere with the process. And he said if you can get totally silent and quiet, then sudden insight can happen. And to him, a physicist, he said, completely explains instantaneous healing through prayer. I think in the medical profession they call that, what is that? Sudden remission or something like that.
Spontaneous remission.
Spontaneous remission, yeah. There are so many instances where the experience of an individual totally violates the so-called laws of physics and physiology, that it makes all of this physical realm appear to be what they dubbed it in the film The Matrix, which I thought was brilliant. It's an illusion. And when I was 15 years old, I'm not going to go into the whole experience, but I had an experience where, in retrospect, I would say I was in a dying process in some minutes and was awakened 3 times in a row by something outside of me, and it caused me to get up and get into prayer. And I lost all the time for some hours until right before noon, when I suddenly was completely freed from the Asiatic flu that I was so weak from I could not stand up, and ended up playing football in pads that afternoon. But when I suddenly realized that it was all over with, it was like all of this light disappearing and normal daylight coming in, and then the room around me, like on Star Trek on the transporter, materialized into place, and then all the objects in the room. And it was with the crystal clear understanding I had never doubted since. This is the lighthouse experience in my life, that I was both observing and undergoing that process, a process we all do, of falling asleep back into this unreal dream of physical experience. I've never doubted that since. I'll give you an example of the violation of the laws of physics and physiology. I was riding around in my car in the 60s, and the news was talking about this German paratrooper who'd gone up in a plane to take a practice jump at Rhein-Main Air Force Base outside of Wiesbaden, and his chute didn't open, and he fell 3,500 feet right into the middle of the concrete runway. Now, the laws of physics and physiology would say they need to come out there and wash up the puddle of blood. Well, that evening, when the astonished reporters were interviewing him sitting upright in his hospital bed with his one broken leg and a bunch of bruises and no other internal or external injuries, they said, "How in the world did you survive that?" And he said, "Well, our instructor taught us how to land right. And he taught us that if we did land right, we could survive any fall. I knew how to land right. I knew I was going to land right, and I knew I was going to survive." And that mindset completely changed his experience. And if you look up the book or the video, The Secret, and read into that, you realize that people are finding that what they hold in their consciousness is what they evolve in their experience. And it is far more determined on what we feel and think. And feelings are a great part of it because they have a lot of energy. And you know, there's that statement in the Bible, and that which ye most greatly fear shall come upon thee. Not may, but shall. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. As far as reincarnation and other lives, I think I have to accept that I believe it to be true. I was at an NLP weekend-long study up in Vancouver once, and Tad James was a lecturer, and he put us through this technique that he had developed of timeline therapy, where you go into meditative state and you visualize a line along which all of your life events lie. And if you have a recurring problem you haven't solved, you go back to the first major impression of that and get over it, and you feel all the pain, but you absorb the lesson. Then you go back in earlier time, and the psyche realizes it's never happened yet, and all the pain disappears, and it cascades all the way up to the present. It's a tremendous technique. In any event, I did that. And what I was dealing with was a sense of betrayal that's happened to me through family and friends and business associates and some of those great judges and lawyers down at the courthouse and so forth when I was in law practice. Anyway, all kinds of things in life. And I had an occurrence that was more vivid still in my mind than being right here tonight. And it was a past life. It was of another life form on another planet, maybe in this galaxy, maybe not. I knew my name, my wife's name, my daughter's name, my son's name, the name of the planet that we were on. I saw everything that happened in greater detail than this. All of the people were the most lovely people. They communicated telepathically. They believed in loving all life forms around them. They killed nothing to eat. They were silicon-based, and they absorbed sunlight for their energy, and their bodies were able to convert that into mass form for molecular structure, for growth and healing and so forth. It was the most beautiful, wonderful life form I could have imagined. And their skin was sort of the color of Ken's shirt there, a little more yellow and lighter, pale yellow-green. And it was just beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I ever imagined. And I think that to me it seems more real than right here, and always has since I had that experience. And I think we all have continuous life regenerations. I've read those books that you mentioned, Brian, by Newton. They're wonderful. He talks a lot about not just past lives that a lot of his patients, he was a hypnotherapist, went into, but the time between lives, where they would assess what they went through in this life and then plan out another life. And they would have great celebrations with people they knew in many past lives that were waiting for them. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience. And so many of these people who were from different walks of life and knew nothing about each other had very similar experiences in his group of patients on this time between lives experience, and the assessment of what have we learned, what have we accomplished, why did we get inserted into this life by choice into that family and so forth, to give us these opportunities for growth. We can take things that are not good as bad experiences, or we can take them and grow from them. And if we use them in that way, then it makes all of the bad experiences good experiences in a greater way. And I think that what you have brought out, that the most important thing for all of us is, kind of continuing on with what you said, the Creator is primarily divine, infinite, omnipresent, omnipotent love. And if we look at that as being the expression of that Creator in everyone, then we can see more of that come out of our experience from everyone we deal with. And I think that is a primary thing that we need to learn from all of these lessons. I know of so many cases where people have had experiences. One was a young lady who was in her car at a stoplight, and this guy came off the curbing and jumped in her passenger door with a a knife and forced her to go out into the woods, and he said he was going to rape her. All the way along the way, she refused to accept that he was not in the image and likeness of divine love. And by the time they got out into the woods, they entered into a long conversation. He apologized to her and he said, I wish you would just take me and drop me off at the police department because I have some more things that I need to correct. Another lady was walking one night through an alley on the way home from work at night, and she was being followed by a man. And so she came around through the alley to the sidewalk, and she had a little staircase that went up to a landing at her front door, and she got to the top and turned around. She was working to know that man was made in the image and likeness of love. And she turned and looked at the man, and he was down at the bottom of the steps, and she said, what do you want? And he said, well, lady, when I first started following you, I intended to do you harm, but by the time we got here, I just wanted to see that you got home safely. Turned around and walked away. What we hold in our consciousness is going to determine the outcome of our lives. We have dominion over that. And like it's stated, and those of you who are Christian, the kingdom of heaven is within you, within all of us. And that's where it's found. If we can get totally silent and listen to that greater consciousness that is all around us, that is in spite of this illusion of physical experience, which I think is completely an illusion. I think that film, The Matrix, was wonderful. I mean, being hooked up to electronic devices is not it, but the idea was right on, I think.
I've got another reincarnation story. There's a gentleman named Patrick Flanagan. He's got about 300 patents. One of the patents is for a device that you can wear on your head that will allow electrical impulses to convert into what would be auditory, but it's actually inside your mind. It's making you hear things that would otherwise not be heard. And they've done some experiments with it. Now they're claiming that it will actually, by wearing this device, you can actually increase your IQ. We're about $800 though, so haven't bought one yet. But Patrick Flanagan, when he was 7 years old, told his mother that he was the reincarnation of Nikola Tesla. He didn't reveal that to the rest of the world until he was in his late 60s. When he was a teenager, they called him out of class over the intercom, told him that his scientific experiment was a success and that the Department of Defense wanted to speak to him because he had just invented a nuclear missile detection technology. While he was like in his early teens. When somebody can do something like that, when you're 7 years old and you build a Tesla coil that's larger than any Nikola Tesla ever built, and the police get called on you because the neighbors are complaining because when they brush their teeth they're getting electrocuted, then something's going on. And he claimed that not only could he remember all of his past life as Nikola Tesla, that he described some of the paperwork to people that had collected the paperwork after Nikola Tesla died. And he met one of these people, and they asked him to describe something, and he described it perfectly. And only Nikola Tesla could have described it because he was the only one that wrote it down on paper. And but he also remembered his past lives as a Tibetan monk, and he claimed that the reason he was able to remember his past lives was because of meditation exercises that they had done in the Tibetan monastery that enabled the person to gain mastery over their memory at a higher level, where they would not lose their memory after dying, and that when they were be reborn, they would remember who they were, and that there were certain mental exercises that you could get down that this could happen. Some of the meditation people I've been reading lately are claiming that this is basically immortality, because once you achieve the ability to remember your past lives, you become immortal because you're going to remember your past life in the next body. And some of the thought process behind what he says this involves is meditating to the point where you synchronize not only the chakras of your own, that are the energy centers in your own energy field, but connecting upwards into the chakras that are above you that go back an infinite number of levels all the way to the source of all creation. And so maybe there's something to it. We won't know until we get there. We're all going to eventually evolve that far, whether it takes us 100 lifetimes or 1,000,000, because energy fields continue to evolve and get more complex.
Well, thank you, Jan. That was quite an interesting talk, and it's elucidated a lot of other interesting talks too. Actually, speaking as a degreed scientist with a couple of degrees, actually science is not really exact because, in fact, actually, there's a thing called probability, and so in science, what happens is the most probable thing, and you have these sigma points, and so as you go off to the fifth sigma points, the probability of something happening is like 0.0001%. It's just like the election of Donald Trump. I mean, that was off at the 2 or 3 sigma point, but strange things do happen, and are sometimes inexplainable. And so science doesn't really claim to explain everything, but what it does claim to do, it explains what the most probable thing is. For example, you take gravity. Now, for a long time, the theory of gravity was proposed by Isaac Newton. Okay, and so that was the law until Einstein came along and said, Newton's theory was a special case. Actually, gravity is much more refined than that, and so science moves on and changes its mind. Now, whether science can prove reincarnation or not, I don't know. Perhaps it can. It hasn't crossed my consciousness yet, and perhaps it never will. But science really is based on the observable fact, actually. But it doesn't exclude things that are like the fifth sigma point out. I mean, that's what science says. And actually in subatomic physics, really very, very weird things happen. There's no question about that. But it's all probabilistic, actually. The fact that a position of an electron, for example, can never be accurately predicted. It could be, there's a probability it could be in this place or that place, but it's not possible to tell for certain. So science is not viewed as an exact thing. But when you get into the realm of mysticism and so on and so forth, I think you're jumping into the far realms of probably the 10th sigma point, which most people will never encounter because it's so rare. And I think most people don't encounter reincarnation and never will. And therefore, it's to them it doesn't exist. Now, maybe for some people it does exist. So a lot of this religion and philosophy really, I think, is at the far extremes of sigma points. And for most people, it just doesn't exist because it's not real to them. And the other thing to say about things, people often believe what they want to believe. Actually, they can fool themselves into believing almost anything. I mean, for example, a whole realm of Americans believe that Trump will make America great again. Now, that's probably the biggest false belief we'll ever see. But it's real to them. And they'll tell you, yes, definitely, it's going to happen. Well, I don't think it will happen. I ever talk about that, titled Make America Great Again, Fat Chance, and the chance, again, it's a probability theory. My feeling was there's a very low probability of that happening. It could happen by luck. An accident is possible. But life is very uncertain, actually. And so one can't ever really discount anything going on. Maybe Jesus will suddenly reappear one day. He'd be probably shot for being, not acceptable to, the powers that be, but never mind. He might do that. It's possible. I don't think it will happen, but again, this is all probability theory, and the probability theory does work. Actually, it's the basis of a lot of science. You can actually calculate amazing things using probability theory. And, so I think life is uncertain. I think that most of us live in hope. Most of us have a strange suspicion that these wonderful things that everybody promises will never happen, but we like to believe they happen, and that's why people are so certain. The other thing to say is I think that people are so vehement about things, about their beliefs, really have an underlying fear that they're wrong. Actually, they're trying to sort of bolster themselves up by making this firm statement. Well, it helps them, and if it helps them, I suppose that's okay. But I think they're oftentimes deceiving themselves because nobody can be that certain, actually, about things, about life, because life is uncertain. And probability theory is a theory that does work. So
So many times I find myself getting up after John speaks. I guess it's just a thing.
glad to provoke you.
Reincarnation is a very messy subject. It challenges many things. People making claims. I'm on a rant here right now. Okay, so Shelley Caher, locally here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is a past lives regression therapist, and I was delighted to hear from her when she was speaking over in Fort Worth that, in fact, she had regressed 6 Cleopatras here in the DFW area. I'm not contending that there is not a lot of illusion and a lot of self-deception. But they also say, ask and ye shall receive, seek and so forth. And there was a time in my life when I really was earnestly seeking, because I needed to know on 2 particular issues what course I was going to take. And so I was asking very intently, praying very intently, and I did have an experience. And I can put it down to, I was actually meditating with a group of 12 or 13 other people, and I want John to hear that, because group meditation, or what they call satsang, can be very, very beneficial. It can help you kind of get over the hurdle personally maybe you wouldn't have done. But I did have a past life recall, and I recounted that to several people, and I don't know, about 8 months later, I was at a used bookstore with my mom, and she walked up and she said, "Is this what you were talking about?" And some student, I guess, had the bad manners to write a dissertation about this individual, and it hit, I don't know, about 100 points of what my recall had been. And but the strangest thing about it was that there were incidents that this guy was relating on, historical information, and I knew more about some of the incidents than he did. So, you can get down to, demonic possession or some kind of weird thing, or I got plugged into. Let me tell you, that guy had all my faults and foibles. I mean, it's just like looking in a mirror. And I found it a very beneficial experience. And I wasn't going to mention this on tape, but I had a great loss in my life. I had a fiance, and we were going to announce our engagement, and she died January 30th. She was going to announce on the 14th. I actually did terminal care for her, although we weren't married, and very close, loved her very dearly. And a few years passed, and I had the strangest incident where a child in diapers, a girl child, called out my name as I was passing at a hotel, called out my name with her exact accent. And it stopped me in my tracks, and I turned around, and I'm looking at three very amazed people. I didn't know who said it, because it happened behind my back, and I only later figured out it had to have been the child. And later on, I actually worked with those people. They were in the same church I was, the father, mother, and the child. She grew up, reached 18, got married. She's moved away, had kids and so forth. It brings it down to a really important point. I'm pretty positive that was someone who was reborn, who their life got cut short, and for some reason or other she got another chance. But what was my part in that new life? My part was to stand back and realize that every person in our lives is a gift from God. And God has a destiny with everyone. So that is where you get to a point of, okay, can I give up my own concerns or my own wants, needs, whatever? I have a collection of my fiance's stuff. If it ever comes about, if it's 10, 20 years later, I'm still around, she's still around, I'd love to give that to her. I'd love to give that to that person and see how much she recalls. But I'm not going to interfere. So, reincarnation's a really messy thing, people.
Hi, I don't know if I'm even entitled to be
You are.
given my first time. And
Yeah, you have 5 minutes.
I don't even need that long. I basically wanted to say, a rose by any other name. Given to what Jian was speaking to, to me, you have to have passion to be able to give compassion or show compassion, period. How you arrive at that point depends on whatever the environmental circumstances are that one was raised in, potentially, okay? As it relates to whether one's an atheist or a religious individual, actually an individual that's involved in religion, which tends to be a group experience for the most part, religion is more than just a belief, a faith, whatever, because it is a community as well that is provided to the people that come together. Being an atheist is being very much an individual, okay? And most atheists, again, a rose by any other name, it could be called a gobsmack, it doesn't matter, okay? You've arrived at the decision most of the time from having a foundation in some form of religious education, okay? And you've decided as you've aged that this doesn't make sense to me anymore, I don't buy all the parables or what have you, and I choose not to live my life, and so on and so forth. And so it's really, in the scheme of what society expects of people, a courageous thing to say, I guess, that you're an atheist, okay? But it doesn't come without having had the experience, because you can't say I'm one thing if you don't have had experience in another area, okay? And I just really think that organized religion, especially as it's set up in this country, has, while it may have had an ideal in mind when it started out over here, it has just gone off the shelf totally. I mean, it's really becomes contrary to what it preaches. It's very judgmental. I don't think atheists are judgmental. I think they've had the experience. When you say, that's too judgmental or too opinionated, I don't think that atheists in general really care what, another person does. They've just decided to state that I don't have that belief system. And on the flip side, okay, the religious, especially the fundamentalists, not only deliver judgment on that individual, but also indicates that they will go to hell or wherever they think they'll end up ultimately. And so I find also that living life and experiencing everything to its fullest and being a decent, good, kind human being is what needs to be focused on in this world that we live in. And I find that religion does not provide that tolerance to really go after and achieve those things. It's very, very judgmental. And I find that an atheist is more in the game of attempting to go after those goals, to live in the moment, to learn by one experience to the next, because they've already had, the majority have already had some experience in even religious upbringing, beliefs and what have you. They've decided that that doesn't work for them, and they are going forward and looking at what have you, what life brings and what they can do to participate and be passionate about the moment that they're in. And so at the end of the day, whether it's, there is a God and there is heaven and whatever is written, is really not even determined, because it was written by man, okay? So, why is everyone in such an uproar that you must believe this thing one way or another? Why aren't we focusing on experiencing life here, now, and living in the moment and being able to roll with change, whatever presents itself to you, rather than thinking about what one has to do to mold their life to make it into another life that has only been determined by what one of us wrote down in the first place. So I don't get that. And yes, I am an atheist at this at this point in my life, and I've had a religious upbringing, okay? And I do, not see myself ever returning or having a last minute, moment, epiphany on my deathbed. Because if you're a decent human being, and there happens to be this God, and this heaven, and the place that one can go to, then if you've been a decent human being, whatever the entrance is all about, hopefully I'll make it, okay? But it really is not going to be something that I'm going to design my life to here on earth right now, today, and probably, as I feel, will not continue my, after I'm gone. But I hope that I make an impact on someone's life while I'm here, and really take in the essence of life and see a lot more kindness being generated by people, because there's not a whole lot of it out there right now anyhow. And everyone's got their built-in bigotries, much of which have been developed through religion. So most of the wars and catastrophic instances of annihilating complete populations have all been done in the form of religion. So I don't see that as something that, you know, one should be running around chasing and saying, gee, I'm a member. Okay, I do not agree with that at all. And it continues on to this very day in Miramar, wherever. And it's just appalling to me. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents.
Well, I totally agree with what you had to say. However, I wouldn't classify any group, including atheism, as being non-judgmental. We had a speaker here one time who had a black t-shirt on with big black letters that said, "I think, therefore I'm an atheist," implying you don't think, you stupid, therefore you have a religion. Now, in every organization on earth, whether it is a Christian church or Buddhism or Judaism or the Muslim religion, in every organization on earth, there are good people and bad people. There are people who are judgmental and people who are non-judgmental. And I think these characteristics, like you have described, of being non-judgmental and more loving to everyone and accepting that, you know, they're where they are and let them be there. That's their choice, is the way to approach it, and not think that you are so much more elevated because you have this belief or that belief. Because, you know, I had these 2 classmates, I've mentioned this before in law school, 2 brothers, and they would, every now and then we'd be sitting over in the lounge and they would look at me and they would, one or the other would say, "Albert, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior?" Well, I chose never to answer them in a way that satisfied them. I would say, well, let's define terms. And we never came to the same exact definition of the word accept, or the word Jesus, or the word Christ, or the term Jesus Christ or Christ Jesus, or the word personal, or the word Savior. Because my viewpoint of it all was different from theirs. Theirs was right down the line of whatever their church was. I never even asked them what their church was, but I'm sure that terminology fits some church. In any event, we remained good friends. It didn't make any difference to me what their beliefs were. And I think they felt somewhat the same, although they did have that worried sign on their face when they would ask me that. But the acceptance of everyone the way they are, unless they're being cruel and criminal to other people or animals, I don't tolerate that at all either. I think there we can make judgments and we can step in and stop certain kinds of actions. We really have the obligation to do it here and there to prevent criminal activity and so forth. But nevertheless, the idea of seeing all mankind as the individual expression of one Creator that's divine love, and the stronger we hold that in our minds, the more we can see a transition in what we're experiencing from people in our lives.
Well, okay.
3 times and you're out.
Okay, 3 times and I'm out. I said I was a minister's son. I said I was a pastor's son. What I didn't say is I was raised an atheist. And he was an atheist. And later on in his life he got more honest. So I grew up as an atheist. I went through the Cuban Missile Crisis as an atheist child, going to the shelters. We actually had a civil defense program back then, so we're going to these shelters that's supposed to protect you during an atomic blast. But the whole thing fell apart for me when at age 15 I became acquainted with a Belgian witch. And she began demonstrating all kinds of paranormal abilities, and then she started training me, and I started doing paranormal stuff too. And one day I just had a talk with me, myself, and I figured out my atheism died because it doesn't work anymore. because there is another realm. What do you do about that other realm? Well, that started a quest. It started a 14-year quest for me. But that's my short answer.
I had an epiphany. What if everybody was an atheist? You really think there wouldn't be any war? They just used religion to manipulate people, to separate and divide us. Those people that were doing that would have found something else to separate and divide us in order to use that to serve as a tool to create ways to make money. Because believe it or not, the reason we fight wars is because certain individuals make a lot of money off of fighting war.
I think I'm the last one standing.
Take it where you got it, man. Which way you gonna go, Tom?
Anyway, I want to thank our speaker for having done a great job here tonight. You was all thinking and talking. That's 90% of it. There's a my uncle used to say that he said you can never tell from where you sit how your pants will hang till you stand up. This is proof that you never know. So the whole point is you never know. And you die, the biggest believer in the world is going to die thinking there's going to be heaven or hell or something. And the biggest non-believer is going to, but maybe, just maybe, he'll only be 6 feet under, and that's it. And the biggest non-believer is going to die thinking he's going to be 6 feet under, and there's nothing else. But maybe, just maybe, there's something to all this. It's the great unknown. And if you look back in history of civilization, all civilizations, if there was no religion, someone would start a religion. Because they would start thinking that they can't just die, you know. There must be more to it. So the point is, it's a great unknown. And I believe, I like what our speaker had to say today. We've got to live for the present. We've got to live for who we are. We've got to live to get along with each other. We've got to recognize that in religion, in many cases, there was someone, I forget who it was, said it was the opium of the people, you know. It was, that was Marx. He said it was the opium of the people, but I can remember people were starving and they were having babies and they had nothing. And the religious way was to keep it going. And I can remember my mother was a Catholic, and she said, well, it's God's will, you know. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to live in squalor. You can work yourself out of it. And so we've got to work together. We've got to be a good society, a good group of people, and we can do better, I think, if we work together and provide. We only live once. Enjoy the trip. So let's do what we can to make things better for everybody. And if we can do that, we'll get along. We'll do better. We can avoid starvation. We can avoid a lot of things. I always advocate, I've been pushing the shorter workday for the last 40 years. And the reason is it puts more people to work. And you got more people working paying taxes. You got less people not working draining taxes. Government gets a twofold benefit of increased tax revenue without raising taxes. You have less bills to pay for people that aren't working as they are working. This is something we can all do. And this is the direction to move in. Automation replaces people with machines. Machines don't pay taxes. We're killing ourselves. We don't even know it. We've met the enemy, and it is us, and we got to do something about it. So let's work together. So thank you. And our speaker gets the last word.
Thank you. So I have a confession to make. If I were really pushed talking about religion, actually I didn't say anything about religion. Did you know this? I didn't say anything about religion because it's a personal journey. So if I were asked about if I believe in religion, I usually would say I'm spiritual but not religious, which means I have a spiritual pursuit, which means some things are non-material. It's just important or more important than material. Religious in many ways is associated with an institution. And some people like institutions because there's a community of support. Some people don't like institutions as being kind of dogmatic. So it's a personal preference, it's a personal journey. So I'm not here to support or to criticize any religion or faith, as it's a personal choice. If it works for you, it's good. The only thing that I would say I don't like is to see how religious institutions that are not preaching love and compassion, but rather hate and fear, and using hate and fear to arouse people's parochial support for some kind of causes that that are dear to only certain groups of people, not benefiting the maximum number of people. So to me, a true religion and true spiritual path is a one that based on love and compassion. If it's love and compassion, it's a good religion, good faith, but it tries to make intimidation, fear, and hate and divisiveness. That, to me, is not a good religion. So I will make this personal judgment. But coming back to impermanence, is that makes aware the past is a history and future is a mystery. What we should focus is today, and not only focus today, is also to raise, like we say, to put capital. You put a positive capital in your spiritual bank. So whether there is a future life or reincarnation, we don't know. But if you put positive, compassion, loving deposit in your spiritual bank, whether there is this life or next life, you will be rewarded, rather than fear and divisiveness. If we have a positive spiritual legacy in this world, we may be rewarded next life, we may not. If you don't believe in that, but at least you make a positive impact in this world. So that's my point, that we all need to put positive deposit in our spiritual bank, so we can make a good difference in this world, whether this one or next one.
Well, that's it for tonight. Our speaker is welcome here. They're going to kick us out here at 10:30, just so you know. And our speaker is here. She wants to talk to any of you. But the formal meeting is over. And see you all next week.
All right.